This is lecture 13. We're going to talk about the Salem witch crisis. This takes place in the late 17th century. It lasts about a year, from January 1692 to January 1693. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the witch crisis because we've supplied you with an excellent website here that has just a multitude of information. You have indictments, you have the proceedings, transcriptions from the court testimony, arrest records, just a variety of good primary sources. This website gives you biographies of the major characters, both on the prosecution side and the victims. So as far as chronology, things like that, I'm going to let you use this website to fill in those blanks. But I want to talk more generally about the witch crisis. I want to talk about its significance and its context. I want to talk about the type of evidence that's used in the witch crisis. And then I want to talk about some of the explanations provided to us by historians for the Salem witch crisis. This is an incredibly juicy topic for historians. The reason is that we have all these primary sources. When you have a crisis that's limited in time like this to about 1 year, and we have transcriptions and arrest records and all these primary sources that fill in the blanks for historians. So you have the archival information there, and of course historians take these primary sources and bring their own interpretation to it. And we'll talk about these different interpretations when we talk about explanations for the witch crisis. During this 1 year of the crisis, we have over 144 people arrested. I'm just going to give you a few statistics here. Of these 144, only 38 are male, the rest are female. 14 women and 5 men are hung for witchcraft. Some other people died in jail while awaiting trial or execution. Let's talk about context first. Where do we fit the witch crisis into the broader scope of history? One historian said that it's part of King William's War. King William's War is fought on the frontier north of Salem, between the British colonists and the Indians, and the witch crisis is a part of this larger conflict in that some of the people who are living in Salem, some of the young girls who make accusations of witchcraft, had actually lived on the frontier during King William's War. On the frontier, these people who have since moved back to Salem, they saw atrocities committed, rapes and murders and kidnapping and homes burnt and the everyday events of war. And one historian has made the argument that it is the memory, the nightmares of these atrocities, which is going to help provoke the witch crisis. So King William's War, Salem is a part of that. Another context is trade. The Wabanakis, the Indians, and the British colonists have an uneasy relationship in that they're both somewhat dependent on the other, yet they do not trust each other. And relationships built on dependency can also often be troublesome, as you probably know in your own personal lives. So this larger trade relationship keeps the Indians and the Europeans in contact with one another, yet it is a fairly unwelcome contact. Other contexts for the witch crisis. The Puritan cosmos, or the Puritan cosmology, how the Puritans see themselves working in the wider universe. This is probably the most important of the historical contexts. The Puritans believe themselves to be the manifestation of God's will here on earth. Quite often the Puritans have convinced themselves that the Indians are manifestations of Satan here on earth. For the Puritans, God is an immanent deity. He's here in the village, here in the church house, here in our home. The Puritans have a genuine relationship with God. If you look at Genesis 1 and 2, you can see the differences in these Christian gods. Genesis 1, the God of creation, let there be, and he saw it was good. You're familiar with this. This is a transcendent God. This is not the God you pray to. This is not the God you have a personal relationship with. Look at the deity in Genesis 2, however. He walks in the garden with Adam and Eve. He gets angry like a human being. He's jealous. He makes man by forming him out of the clay of the earth and then blowing the breath of life into him. This is an immanent God. This is the God that the Puritans respond to. The Puritans believe that all that happens is God's will, and that it is their task to interpret God's will. They believe that God is all-powerful, and that he uses Satan to work mischief in the lives of themselves, their neighbors, and of the Puritan colony. The Puritans believe that they have to interpret God's will. If a tragedy strikes a family, an infant dies, or someone is killed in a farming accident, it is the Puritans' task to divine why God did this. If good fortune happens, it's also their task to divine why God favored them. So the Puritan cosmos, this cosmology, this way of understanding the universe, lies really at the heart of this crisis. Let me talk about a couple of significances here. The significance that jumps out at me, the first, comes directly from this cosmology, and that is, otherwise sensible adults are hanging their neighbors on the accusations of adolescent girls. Why is everybody going crazy, you would ask? Well, this Puritan cosmology makes this very, I don't know if it's predictable, but it makes it possible. The Puritan cosmology says that the world is alive with mischief created by Satan, demons, witches, agents of Satan. And that when these little girls make accusations that such and such neighbor is a witch, that such and such neighbor came through their window at night and pressed their bodies down upon them, pulled their hair, contorted their bodies, strangled them, pinched them, this is quite believable because it fulfills the arguments of the Puritan cosmology. Another significance emerges from Salem, and that is the inversion of gender order. Let's face it, Salem, in the Salem colony, or in the Salem village and Salem town, adolescent girls are at the bottom of the social hierarchy. They are to be seen, not heard. Yet here, during this Salem witch crisis, adolescent girls are given top priority. They're elevated to the top of the hierarchy. We are hanging our neighbors on the word, on the accusation of these little girls. So suddenly there's an inversion of gendered order. Women's role is in the house, in the domestic sphere. Men govern the public sphere where commerce and politics take place. Yet here at Salem, women are in the public sphere, in court, making accusations, accusations that are followed through with execution. So there is a definite inversion of gendered order here in Salem. What kind of evidence was used in Salem to accuse somebody of being a witch and then to convict them? I'm going to quote here from one of the documents recorded here in the Salem court proceedings. The children were, quote, bitten and pinched by invisible agents, their arms, necks, and backs turned this way and that, and returned back again, so that it was impossible for them to do this of themselves, and beyond the power of any epileptic fit or natural disease to cause. So what we have here are these young girls showing evidence of being bitten or pinched showing evidence of contorting their bodies in ways that's not physically possible. Other evidence would be to speak in a language that you do not know. You can see this in our own time. You can simply Google or go to YouTube and look at people speaking in tongues in church. And you can see how you can construct what might sound like a legitimate language when it's actually mumbo jumbo. Other evidence, if you knew things from the past that you should not know, or if you could anticipate and predict the future, if you showed unusual strength. These are all evidence of witchcraft. I mentioned earlier that most of the witches are women, and we need to ask why. For one thing, women are less physically able to protect themselves than men, but it goes deeper than that. The Christian archetypes for women center around two historic figures, or two mythological figures, Eve and Mary. Mary, of course, is perfect. Eve is obviously a troublemaker, causing the fall of man in Christian mythology. So we have these two old Christian archetypes. Here, the Eve archetype is brought forward to help explain the mischief created by these women. And these women are, these Puritan women in the crisis, are viewed as incomplete men. They're not as smart as men. They're physically incomplete. They're viewed as empty vessels with which the devil can fill with his mischief, gossipy and vain. So women have the odds kind of stacked against them here. Another sign of witchcraft, another way you might be accused of practicing witchcraft, is that if you laughed during prayer, or if you did anything unusual during prayer. There's evidence of one gentleman returning home from a tavern where he'd gotten drunk, and as he's walking through the village square, he falls to his knees and begins to retch. Now, he was viewed by some of the Puritans there, listening to him and watching him as he did this. Now, there's only one thing that a Puritan should be doing on his knees, and that is praying. Yet this man is on his knees, retching. That horrible sound coming from this man on his knees is prayer, obviously, but it must be prayer to the devil and not to God. So these are some of the things that could cause you to be arrested. Another one is guilt by association. If you knew a witch, you may have consorted with her. If your husband or wife is accused of witchcraft, then perhaps you too are practicing witchcraft. If you exhibited character flaws of some sort, again, you might be accused of witchcraft. If you transgress gender, in other words, if a woman was a widow and she was running her family's estate or running her family's business, that's gendered masculine. So a woman that transgresses gender could be accused of witchcraft, and this quite often happens to widows. Now, what about explanations? Like I said, historians love this topic, and they've devised a number of explanations. I'm going to mention them for you here. One is ergot or ergot poisoning. I've heard it pronounced both ways. It looks French. Ergot poisoning refers to the mildew that grows on rye that is stored over the winter. Of course, the Puritans store rye so they can make bread with it and, of course, feed it to their livestock. If this rye gets wet, this mildew will grow on it, and then the ingestion of this ergot in bread will cause people to hallucinate. So one author put forward the idea that Salem is, the whole town's on a trip, an hallucinogenic trip. Another author said that this was a conflict between Salem town and Salem village. Salem town lies on the coast. It's much more cosmopolitan. Seeing the effects of modernity as people come and go, ships with sailors come and go. Salem village is to the west of Salem town, and it's dominated by farming, obviously. This argument says that the people in Salem village resented the encroachment of modernity upon their way of life, and they tracked the direction of the accusations and found that most of the accusations originated in Salem village toward people who lived in Salem town. This is a complicated social argument. It has a lot to it. You have a sense of the Enlightenment ideas encroaching upon this traditional society, and the traditional society fighting back by accusing people in Salem town of witchcraft. Again, a complicated but interesting explanation. And then we have another explanation that associates witches with Indians. This goes back to the horrors that take place on the frontier, where the young girls saw atrocities committed by the Indians and now have resurrected these bad dreams. And these dreams have manifested themselves in the appearance of witches. The last two explanations. One is fraud. The girls are making it up. The girls knew they had done something wrong, and in order to distract their parents from that, they create the witch crisis. And then the final one is perhaps it is real. Perhaps the witch crisis is genuine. One of the central figures in the witch crisis, Ann Putnam, later, about 10 years later, 15 years later, she admitted in 1706, quote, "I desire to be humbled before God. It was a great delusion of Satan that deceived me in that sad time. I did not do it out of anger, malice, or ill will." Even this apology sounds like it's blaming everything on the devil again, doesn't it? It's kind of a half apology at best. At any rate, the Salem witch crisis is a bizarre episode in Western history that demonstrates modernity, the Enlightenment, gender, all these large factors being mixed up in this Puritan society. Thank you.